Daf Yomi Bava Metzia, ownership and authority, אחריות, טעות, סופר, במקח, וממכר. We'll gain a whole new idea of ownership, of the meaning of ownership and the authority we have over our property, and also an understanding of the statement of Shlomo HaMelech that we use so often in the Gemara of Eved loyve leish malveh. A debtor is a slave to his creditor. And what does that mean? Eved loyve leish malveh. Why am I a slave to my creditor? I understand I'm indebted to my creditor. But if I borrow $1,000 from you, why does that make me your slave? What does a slave mean? What does an Eved mean? An Eved is somebody who who has no ownership of his own. Eved is somebody who owns nothing. I might be a millionaire and I need $1,000 and I borrow $1,000 from you. Why does that make me an Eved? Why does that make me a slave? Implying as though I don't own anything. What about all the other property that I own? We'll get some understanding of the relationship between a debtor and a creditor. What we need to understand is the halacha that if I borrow from you and the loan is documented, my property becomes, you gain a lien on my property. You have a right to claim from my property in the event that I can't repay the loan. And that's a lien that happens automatically at the time of the loan. What happens if there's no mention of any such lien in the document? So I borrow money from you, we write a document, and we don't say in the document that my property is mortgaged to you, that you have a lien over my property in the event that I default. We have a principle in our Gemara of אחריות, טעות, סופר. We say that was a technical mistake. The secretaries left out that piece. Clearly, if you lent me money, you wanted a lien, you're entitled to a lien on my property, and you'll have a lien on my property. If it's not specifically mentioned in the document, that's just an error, and we ignore it. The lien still applies. And that's what the Gemara says, Omar Shmuel ma tamayod rabbanon savri אחריות, טעות, סופר. That if akhrayut is not specifically mentioned, it's only because it's a technical mistake. It's not because it was deliberately excluded from the loan. Ask the Gemara, did Shmuel really say that? Did Shmuel not say shvach, shvar, v'shibud tzarich limlach? That the secretary has to check with the writer of the document. Are you including various things, including shibud? Are you including this lien? Which implies he might well say, no, I don't need a lien on his property. This is just a favor. I'm lending him the money. I don't need a lien on his property. Answers the Gemara, lo kashya kan bishtar halva'a de lo yahiv inish zuzi bichdi. One case of Shmuel is talking about a loan document where people don't throw their money away. So if I'm lending you $1,000 or $100,000, I expect to get it back. And the mechanism for getting it back in the event that you're cash tight at the time you have to pay me is that I have a lien on your property, and that's something I would insist on. But kan במקח וממכר דאביד איניש דזבין ara ליומי. But the other is talking about a sale document. I buy property from you. Do you give me a warranty that in the event that the property is taken away from me by an earlier creditor of yours, you will make good the amount that I paid? That would be a warranty. What happens if the warranty isn't written into the document? Do we also assume a warranty, that people don't buy property without a warranty? Says the Gemara, no, sometimes people will take a risk on a property. Maybe I got it at a very discounted price. And the idea is I've got the property provided nobody takes it from me, provided some earlier creditor doesn't take it from me. Why might I do that? Well, it might be years before a creditor comes. Perhaps a creditor will never take it away from me. And if a creditor does, I've got it for years. During those years, I'm gaining the profits, I'm gaining the income from the property, and I'm willing to take that risk. So the Gemara makes an interesting distinction between the investment of equity into a property and the loaning and the investment of debt. When you invest debt into a business, you expect to get the debt back and you want security because you don't have an upside. All you've got, you've given $1,000 or you've given $100,000, all you expect the $100,000 back. If you don't get the $100,000 back, you've lost. But if you've invested equity into a business, it's different. In invested equity, you've got the opportunity of upside and you realize there's risk. So in debt investment, you want as little risk as possible because there's little upside, and we assume that you've taken a lien on the property. In equity investment, you understand that there's an upside, and therefore maybe you didn't take a lien on the property, and therefore we'll be governed by the words of the documents. It's interesting just to think for a moment. This Perek Shnai Mochsin is something that young boys learn in their early stages of Gemara learning. Bava Metzia, Shnai Mochsin. So you've got a child of 13, 14, 15 is learning about the difference between debt and equity investment. Just by the way, as he's learning, his mind is beginning to grapple and to understand with these differences. That's how the Jewish mind is developed. And this is just one little daf of Gemara, just all the other things we've dealt with in our shiurim over time, just to think that even young kids are exposed to these ideas at a very, very early age, and they grapple with these ideas. So that's how the Gemara resolves these two contradictory statements of Shmuel. One is talking about an investment of debt, one is talking about an investment of equity. The levels of risk are different. Tosfos adds and says, yes, that's true, but it's not just a question of whether it's debt or whether it's equity. There is an example of equity investment where we will also assume that there's a lien even if the lien wasn't written into the document. That would be in a case where I buy a field from you. We don't write the lien into the document. The document is just a straight sale. And then the field gets taken away from me. Not because you've got an earlier creditor who's taken it away from me because he has a mortgage on it, but because you'd stolen the field in the first place. It was never yours. And the original owner comes to claim. Now, what's the difference? When the original owner comes to take it away from me, he doesn't just take away the field, as we see further on in our Gemara. He takes away all the revenue I've got from the field during the time I was holding it, because it wasn't mine to start with, it was his. That means there's no upside. So when I buy a field, it's true that it's an equity investment. It's true that there's an opportunity for upside, and therefore I'm willing to take risk. And if I didn't write in the lien, then there isn't a lien. Because I understand maybe I'm going to lose the field. But what I don't expect is that I will lose the field and any profits I've made from it, which means that I gain nothing from it altogether. Clearly then I want my money back, I want to be compensated. So Tosfos makes it clear that this is b'shtar mekach, aval in nigzal tarfa. If somebody from whom the property was initially stolen takes it away from the buyer, chozer ala gazlan, he goes to the seller, who is the thief. Afilu belo achrayut, even if there's no mention of the lien there's no warranty in the document. Va'afilu mishabdi kimin dahavi mekach ta'ut havi le'shtar halva'a. Because now what has really happened, if you unpack this, what's really happened is, I paid you $100,000. You gave me a stolen field. So in fact, you gave me nothing. So what's the $100,000 I gave you? It's a loan. If I've given you a loan, we go back to the halachot of a loan, and the halachot of a loan, we assume there's a lien because we don't have the risk appetite. So clearly we'll do. So we've got to view this, although technically it's a document of sale, using the principles of our Gemara, says Tosfos, we've got to view this as a loan, not as a sale, and apply the principle of אחריות טעות סופר, that if the lien was not specifically mentioned in the property, that's a mistake, a technical mistake. Clearly there was an intention that if the property was taken by an original owner from whom it was stolen, and the property and its income is taken away from me, clearly I can come back to you and claim money. And if you don't have any money, I'll come to your property and I'll take your property away. That's how the Gemara is structured here. What's interesting is the Gemara comes to the conclusion at the end. Rava says, Hilchata achrayut ta'ot sofer hu bein b'shtarei shitrei halva'a, bein b'shitrei mekach וממכר. Rava says at the end, and the Beis Yosef brings it in the Tur in Reish Chof Hei, that Rava says at the end, we don't make this distinction that the Gemara is trying to make in Shmuel. And it makes no difference whether this is a debt investment or an equity investment, even though there's no mention of a lien. Your property is bonded to the other person. There is a warranty. There's always a warranty. If you buy property, there's a warranty. If the property gets taken away from you, whether by a creditor or by a thief, you go back and you claim from the original seller, or you take the seller's property. And the same, of course, applies if it's a loan. That's how the Gemara concludes, and the Rambam brings that l'halacha in Hilchos Mechir Perek Yutes, Kol hamocher karka or eved or shar metaltin arei ze chayev ba'achriyutan, kach hadin b'chol memkar af al pi shelo piresh halokeach davar ze ela kanastan. Even though there's no mention of a lien on the property in the sales document, not just the loan document, the sales document as well, we still assume that that was the intent. There was always a warranty. She'achrayut shelo nizkar ta'ut soferu. Because the principle is achrayus ta'ut sofer. We are so sure that nobody would enter into such a deal without the warranty that we assume if the warranty is not specifically documented, that was an error. The intention was that there is a warranty. In the next halacha, the Rambam says, the same applies by gezel, or shata karka gezula, like Tosfos says, or sheba balchov, whether it's stolen or a creditor comes, the tarfa miyad lokeach, nevertheless, one can always go back and claim from the original property. The Brisker Rov, and I've given you in the handout here, asks on the Rambam, if you look in the first paragraph about, this is in Ilchot Shchenim, in the Brisker Rov, in the Rambam, he brings the Rambam, and then he says, Tzarich Iyun, about 7 or 8 lines after the beginning of the first paragraph, Ma shekalal harambam din hayta gzula bahadi chiyuv achrayut. How does the Rambam put into one sentence the case of stolen property and property which has been legitimately sold but on which there's an earlier creditor? So again, we're looking at 2 scenarios. You sell me your property. Scenario 1 is you have an earlier creditor who you were unable to pay. Your creditor has a lien on the property you've sold to me. The creditor comes and takes the property away from me. I can go back to you and I can claim other property, or I can claim the money from you. That's one case. The other case is the field wasn't yours to start with. You stole the field and you sold me a stolen field. And now the original owner comes to take it away from me. Also, the din is I can come back and claim, even if there was no mention of a warranty in our sales agreement, there's an assumed warranty in every sales agreement, is how we hold. But the Rambam packages them together. Ask the Brisker Rov, but these are 2 very different scenarios. Because in the first scenario, you sold me a property. Did you have the right to sell me that property? Well, let's go back in history a little further. You borrowed $1 million from the bank. The bank took a lien on your property. You sold me one of those properties. And later the bank comes to take the property away from you. Did you have the right to sell me the property? Says the Brisker Rov, of course you did. It was your property. And you sell it to me with a warranty, without a warranty, as we've discussed. But it's your property. You're entitled to trade in that property in the meanwhile. The bank's lien remains untouched, no matter who you sell it to. But you're entitled to trade with that property. In the case of Gezula, you're selling me a property that isn't yours. In the case of theft, this is not your property, so there's no sale. So they operate for 2 different reasons altogether. In the first case, the reason that I can come back to you after the bank takes the property away is because we had an implied agreement that I have a lien on your property. In the second case, the reason I come back to you is because, as Tosfos says, there wasn't a sale. You've got my money, and you gave me nothing in return. Give me back my money. These are 2 different scenarios, and they operate differently. Why does the Rambam package it together? And brilliantly, the Brisker Rov, this is the brilliance of the Brisker Rov, and all the great Acharonim, links this to a completely different case. He links it to a Rashi in Psochim. Now I bring the Rashi at the bottom of the source sheet. Where the Rashi is talking about a case where you lend money to a non-Jew before Pesach, and he has a lien on your whiskey. You have a few cases of whiskey, and he has a lien on the whiskey. Or he lends you money, and you have a lien on his whiskey. And then Pesach comes and goes. Who did the whiskey belong to during Pesach? Is what the Mishnah deals with on Daf Lamed Amud Beis in Psochim. Says Rashi, it makes no difference whether we go like Abaya and Rove. Afilu l'Rove domar ad achshav haya b'shut loive moidehu de'ein mechirato la'achirim mechira. When somebody has a lien on your property, the sale is not a sale. Unbelievable Rashi. Ve'ein hekdesho hekdesh. And if you give it to the Beis HaMikdash, it's not a valid donation. Sharei memushkanin hen lemalve. because they are lien, they are mortgaged to the creditor. V'afagav shehen shelo, even though you own it. This Rashi is brilliant. Rashi makes a difference between ownership and authority. You have ownership, but einan birshuto, you don't have authority. Why? Because it's being mortgaged to the owner. Authority is with the bank. When you've borrowed money and the bank has taken a lien on your property, you remain the owner of the property. You can buy and sell the property, but you don't have authority over that property. Anything you want to do with that property, you've got to go and ask permission from the bank. The authority is with the bank. So ownership is just a technical kind of a thing. What's really important is, where's the authority? And so the Brisker Rov says, based on this Rashi, that when a sale is made of a property over which you don't have authority, the sale is invalid. Certainly if the property comes to be claimed, then retrospectively the sale was invalid. Whether it's through theft or it's through creditor. That's why the Rambam puts them together, because we're dealing with authority, not ownership. If you look at it from an angle of ownership, then in the case of a creditor, you had the ownership and you sold it. It was a legitimate sale. Whereas if you stole it, you didn't have the ownership and you had no right to sell it. But if you look at it from the perspective of authority, in neither case did you have authority. And authority is what determines the validity of the sale, in the view of the Rambam, as the Brisker Rov explains the Rambam. And that's what we mean by Eved Loive Leish Malveh. If a person has borrowed money, the Malveh has authority, the creditor has authority over your property. He doesn't have ownership. It's your property. You're living in your house. You've got a mortgage on your house. It's your house, but it's not really. You don't really have authority, because anything you want to do with the house, you've got to go back to the mortgage holder, and you've got to find out whether he gives you permission to do so or not. If you have to keep on asking permission, reshut means permission. To have reshut over something means I don't need permission. I am the owner of the permit. I'm the owner of the permission. And when it comes to trading in property, says the way we learn the Brisker Rov in the Rambam, I need authority, not just ownership. And with that, it's important to appreciate, so what is our rights to our property in the world? If Eved Loive Leish Malveh, if a creditor has authority over my property, I have ownership, he has authority. What about the Ribbono Shel Olam? La Hashem ha'aretz umlo'o, the Ribbono Shel Olam owns the world. He gives me certain rights. He gives me ownership, and we learn the laws of kinyanim. But my rights to use my property are dependent on the reshut, on my authority over my property. Where does my authority over my property come from? The Ribbono Shel Olam. How do I know what authority he's given to me? Shulchan Aruch. That's why the laws of ownership, when we learn Choshim Mishpat, these are laws bein Adam lemakom. What we're learning is halachot of the Torah. It's not just what the law that human beings have agreed between them, like secular law is. That's what we've all agreed, that this is how it operates. Here, there's something else at play. There's an Eved Loive Leish Malveh. We are indebted to the Ribbono Shel Olam. That means the Ribbono Shel Olam owns the authority that we have over our own property, and he grants us authority to use our property in specific ways, as discussed in the Shulchan Aruch, as the Torah teaches us in the Gemara and in the Shulchan Aruch.